Hello, BookTube. I've got a bit of a discussion response video for you. Some of you will have seen Roz at Scallydandling about the books, one of our best BookTube channels. She did a video in which she responded to a piece of UK news by asking the broader question, does reading make us better people? Can it make us better people? And Marc Nash, who's also one of our best booktubers in this little corner of BookTube, followed that up by asking, what is fiction for? Two sort of broader conceptual inquiries into the personal elements of what we all do here. What effect is reading having on us? What effect can it have? What effect would we like it to have? And Roz's original video stemmed from a story in the UK news where a 21-year-old young man named Ben John was convicted under the Terrorism Act of having 70,000 documents in his possession that were alt-right, that were anti-Semitic, that were misogynistic. He'd sent letters to his local school decrying globalist Jewish influence on the world, decrying preferential treatment for women, decrying immigrants, especially decrying immigrants, and was convicted on those grounds and faced a prison sentence. Years in prison is on the books. He could easily have been given that sentence. Instead, the judge in question sentenced him. You may have heard a bit of this news. He sentenced him to read canonical literature. He sentenced him to read Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, even Anthony Trollope. And not only to read it, but to report back. He has to report back to the court what he thinks about it, and in sufficient detail to prove that he's doing the reading. I'm not sure, from what I've been able to read, I've read a lot about this case, I'm not sure that he has to report to the judge. But he has to prove to the court's satisfaction that he is, in fact, reading this literature. No one-to-one correspondence was drawn in the sentencing. The inference that you are expected to draw is that the judge thinks that reading that stuff will improve Ben John as a person, that it will make him more introspective, more empathetic. It will broaden his worldview to the point where it will counteract those 70,000 documents that he downloaded. And there was a howl of protest. It's still ongoing. Among others, anti-Jewish defamation leagues have been howling, saying that this is far too lenient a sentence. This is basically a green light to anyone else who wants to offend under this same terrorism act. It's basically a green light to anyone else who wants to commit this same offense. The Terrorism Act, I wrote it down. I wrote down the wording that was in the Daily Mail, which I'm assuming they copied from the Act. Possessing a record of information likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism. And it was from this case that Roz drew her question, does literature make us better people? And from there, it was Marc's further ruminations on what fiction is actually for. And I couldn't let it pass. I had to comment myself on such a story. It's just too juicy a subject. I have a whole bunch of thoughts on the subject. The first batch of thoughts that I want to convey, that I especially want to convey, I don't know if you can hear me. Just wait. The first batch of thoughts that I want to convey on the subject is that this ought not to be a crime. What was the wording again? A person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism? Well, you're not reading a book when you're committing an act of terrorism. You're committing an act of terrorism. And what business is it of the laws if you're thinking about it? This ought not to be a crime. Ben John could have downloaded 170,000 documents. It still wouldn't be a crime. Shouldn't be a crime. We all ought to be a lot more outraged by the fact that you can face a jail sentence for downloading or even reading stuff online than we're outraged by the sentence. We should be a lot more outraged by the fact that this is a crime in the UK. It shouldn't be. It's a flagrant violation of the freedom to think, the freedom to read. One of the things that Ben John downloaded was an item called The Anarchist Cookbook. Any of you who were in bookstores selling books 20, 25, 30 years ago might remember The Anarchist Cookbook. We sold it at my Barnes & Noble. I handed it to many customers who said, I'm looking for a copy of The Anarchist Cookbook. That book had, among many other things, diagrams for how to build a bomb. Ingredients that you could get at a local hardware store or a local gardening shop. Information is neither good nor evil. You could be writing a Robert Ludlum style thriller and still need that information. Information does not have a moral component. And your reading that information is of no concern to anyone at all except yourself. I don't care if it's 170,000 documents. It's of no concern to anyone. It ought not to be a crime. Okay, so that was my first reaction, is that when I looked at the story, I was freshly horrified. I know these laws are on the books. In the UK, in lots of other parts of the world, of course, I was familiar with it from Austria and Germany, where David Irving served time, the fraudulent Nazi-sympathizing, disgraced British historian David Irving served time in jail merely for questioning the official read of the historical veracity of the Holocaust. That ought not to be a crime. We are all in a seriously dangerous place if Ben John can face a jail sentence for reading material. That is a seriously dangerous place. You can't use reading material to commit a terrorist act. And if you're basing your future terrorist act on your reading material, then it's for future law enforcement to assess the act. Okay? Not the reading material. I guarantee you, there are thriller writers in the UK who have broken this law. What are they supposed to do? Write to the Home Office and say, I'd really like to go to this website and download a whole bunch of this stuff because I want my thriller to have verisimilitude. And then wait 6 weeks for the Home Office to write back and say, all right, citizen, here in this Orwellian dystopia, we give you permission to read this material. That's horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. So that's my first reaction to this whole story, is that this ought not to have been a crime. We ought to be talking about Ben John's parents being concerned, not the court saying you're reading the wrong thing. That offends me as a reader, as it should offend every reader. My second reaction is about the sentence in general, the sentence itself, and that reflects on Roz's question about whether or not reading can make us better people. Of course, reading can make us better people. It makes us more empathetic. It forces, not modern reading, not identity politics, progressive stack reading is designed and litigated solely to reflect the lived experience of the reader in the book. And if they don't find it there, they sue the author, drum them right out of the profession, drive them off social media, get their next book contract canceled. If they don't find an exact reflection of themselves in that book, then that book hates them and is bigoted. So I'm not talking about the 21st century here, but literature for the 1700 centuries before then, before this disease that fell upon the 21st century, inevitably broadens your mind. It inevitably does. It works on you, and while it's working on you, it's putting you in the mind frame of different characters, people who have experiences that you don't have. The exact opposite of what the progressive left wants literature to do and only wants it to do in the 21st century. For all the previous centuries, the whole goal was that the writer was trying to inhabit people different from themselves in order to make you inhabit people different from yourself. And that can't help but have a broadening effect. I firmly believe, I have to believe, because I am reading's #1 fan. I have to believe that it makes us better people, that it makes us more reflective, that it makes us more empathetic, that it makes us more patient with others and more curious about them. There's nothing that'll make you more curious about a strange other life than if you've spent a little time in it. And the easiest way to do that, by far, is to read a book. This also applies to nonfiction. I know Marc Nash, of course, because he's a writer and a novelist, he took it right in the way of fiction. But we're asking, what is fiction for? But it also applies to nonfiction. The more history you read, the less likely you are to fly off the handle at the latest Twitter hot take, because you have a much greater spectrum of context for what you're reading. Reading does that, but mandatory reading does not. In this case, the judge was assigning Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and Anthony Trollope literally as punishments, and that won't work. The best possible outcome that can come from this celebrated case is the status quo, where Ben John is no better or worse place after than before. Of course, he's going to resent reading these things, especially since no one's going to be holding his hand while he's doing it. If he's lucky, he will look on YouTube to hear about Charles Dickens or Anthony Trollope or Jane Austen, and he will find us. If he's lucky, that will happen. He will find this little corner of BookTube, and you know what he'll see when he gets there? He'll see a broad spectrum of readers, all ages, all skin colors, all genders, all races, all nationalities, all viewpoints, no one agreeing with anyone else, and everyone having the time of their lives. He will suddenly, if he's lucky enough, to find Katie at Books and Things, or you name it, anybody talking about these authors and a whole bunch of other authors. if he's lucky enough to find them, then he'll find the magic world of reading that we all know. We already know it exists, and we know it can save him. But he'd have to find it on his own. The court isn't going to help him read these books. They're not assigning him a tutor. And that's what drove me crazy about this story, because Ben John, you might write him off. You might think, some sort of, neo-Nazi incel, 70,000 alt-right documents, a lost cause. No, he's not. He's not a lost cause. These young men between the ages of 18 and 25, I know them to the last detail. I know Ben John as if I'd spent years talking to him, except if I'd spent years talking to him, he wouldn't be the lost cause that he is today. What he needs is a mentor. He needs a friend. He obviously doesn't have it. That's why the alt-right pipeline is able to file people like him into it. They pull young men like him in because they need friends. They're badly lonely. They need guidance. They're at that stage in life where they're resistant to getting it from their fathers. A lot of them don't have fathers. A lot of them don't have involved uncles or grandparents. And that's what they need. Not just a male friend, because this is mostly men that do this sort of thing. Women tend towards more communal friendships. They're not as vulnerable in this way. But the young men like Ben John at age 21 don't just need a male friend. They need an older male friend. They need an older male friend who's not going to take any guff, who's not on a voyage of discovery, who's going to be able to say to them, well, okay, that stuff that you downloaded and that you're parroting is not only factually wrong, and you sound stupid for repeating it, but demonstrably factually wrong, and I can take you through it. Let's go through it over a glass of wine right now. So that when this conversation is over, not this period in your life or this year, but this single conversation, when this conversation is over, you'll be laughing with me that you ever thought that for a minute. We'll just get rid of it. That's what mentors have done for the last 17,000 centuries in human life. They don't seem to do it anymore, and the alt-right is right there to take advantage of it. They're right there to find these men and give them a sense of community. It's a false community. Ben John was hung out to dry the minute he was convicted. There weren't any alt-right lawyers springing forward to defend him. There weren't any alt-right protests in his name that I know of. It's not a real community. And he doesn't know that a real community exists. And the thing is, the irony of this sentence is that reading does have those communities. We could fix him. I know that sounds condescending, but he needs it. He obviously needs it, or he wouldn't be so interested in such crap literature. We could fix him. He's never going to find us, I don't think. And he's never going to get that anywhere else either, because the very lifeline that would have led him towards rethinking, towards greater empathy, towards thinking, okay, I went down a rabbit hole and I can sort of laugh at myself about that. As long as I know now what a problem it is, I can stop. The very thing that would allow him to do all of that is removed from his sentence. Instead, it's just the books. Books don't have any moral value, positive or negative. They don't have any value whatsoever. They aren't actors. They aren't active things. They can't commit terrorism. And they can't save a terrorist. Deprogramming someone as far down the rabbit hole as I suspect Ben John is a long and complicated procedure. It takes care to do. It has to be done very, very sternly. There has to be no give that there's... The standard evasion for young men like this is to say, well, I've wasted a huge amount of reading time, a huge amount of energy, presumably a huge amount of money, downloading all of this stuff, and you're telling me that it's all fraudulent and evil, and if I want to keep my physical freedom, I have to agree with you. The standard dodge that a lot of these young men will have is then to grab onto some of it. But you can't deny that, and that can't happen. There has to be a very stern line in saying it's all junk. But it has to be a caring line. If you say it's all junk, you're just going to radicalize them further. There has to be a hand reached out, and that didn't happen in this case. Ben John was giving a reading list and will be tested on it, knowing that his physical liberty is on the line. Is there any circumstance, any recipe more designed to make him hate the books he's reading than that? I don't know if there is. What the judge should have done is find him a mentor. There are plenty of organizations in the UK that know what they're doing, and they want more than anyone to draw these men out of this horrible, dark rabbit hole that the web affords. They find all these things on the internet. And that rabbit hole is carefully designed to keep filing you in and make it more difficult for you to get back out. And there are specialist groups in the UK that know that. They know all about it. They know how to deprogram, de-radicalize young men like Ben John. I don't think this judge even thought about them. I'm not sure that they would use the tools of Jane Austen and Anthony Trollope. They would probably use books, but it wouldn't be those books. It'd be books that Ben John is likely to like, unassisted. So that's my reaction to the second part here, is that this is a travesty. This is I mean, it's not designed, it's not intended. Of course, I think the intent was probably good. But I think the most likely outcome by far is to further radicalize Ben John. And that would be a terrible shame. I am hoping, I don't know how much internet access he's being allowed. He's been asked by the court to promise not to look at alt-right material online. I have no idea what his parental situation is like, but I have no idea if that means he can't go online. If he can go online at this stage in his radicalization, he will certainly go straight to those boards and those chat rooms to tell them about his BS sentence from the court, to brag about it. If he's that badly radicalized, that's the first thing he'll want to do. If he knows that he has to account for these books, maybe while he's online, he'll go to YouTube, and maybe if he's on YouTube, he'll find us. If he finds us, I think he'll be okay. I think he will be. I know that's a big claim, but if any community of book lovers can do it, it's this community. But I don't think he's ever going to do it. So my reaction to this whole story in this reaction video is twofold. One, what he did, as noxious as it is, should not be a crime. In any free country, it should not be a crime. You should not face any kind of penalty for what reading you do. That's self-evidently Orwellian. That's horrifying. And two, the punishment here, I don't think has any chance of working. I think it's most likely to be counterproductive in exactly the worst way. And I wish that weren't true. The ultimate takeaway here from my reaction is that I wish I could email Ben John. I could fix him. And there are a whole bunch of us in this community that could fix him. This community itself could fix him by giving him a sense of belonging that he clearly wants without any of the poison. But 'tis not to be. But in any case, that's my reaction to this story. I had to do it. I'll leave a link to Roz's video and to Mark's video down below. And I'll wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.